that I'm not going to share with all of you right now, but just a couple of things that I was really struck by. I mean, in terms of the first 3 talks, the way that the Native American context and narratives and the politics of Indian removal enabled 3 really different discussions of otherness. One which focused on political and ethnic otherness, another which focused really on sectional difference, and a third that was able to really think through gender. So that's really striking to me how flexible both your interpretations are, but also the genres and the overall discourse is. But overall, I was also really struck in all 5 papers about this idea of what's natural and the idea of nature in the work itself. And what really struck me as Lauren was talking about just the proliferation of minstrel show imagery, and Nathan was bringing Warren's ideas back to nature. It really struck me that the larger question maybe of the panel in some ways is, how much we depend on the imagery of nature and natural imagery and ideas to naturalize difference, and just how much we make this idea that being different, being other, is somehow natural and normalized. So, and what I'll do now is we can open up the overall panel, I think, to questions, whether you want to piggyback on my comments or direct specific questions to our panelists. I think we'll open the floor if the panelists have things that they want to jump in and say to each other. I think this is a great time for that. So I think we're open to whatever kinds of questions you might have. Yes?
I have a question for Lauren, actually. You were talking about the depiction of the Mammy character. And I'm really glad that you brought up Uncle Tom's Cabin, because the entire time we were talking about like the benevolent African figure, that's what I was thinking about, in the Stowe's racialized view of Africans and as benevolent people. What do you make of that? Do you think they're sort of doing the same kind of work?
Interestingly, there is so much research to be done, or that has been done, but to look at, with the link between black-based minstrelsy, those stock characters, and what Harriet Beecher Stowe did. Harriet Beecher Stowe was openly against and never once authorized her book or ideas to be adapted for the stage. She didn't agree with these characters being used. She didn't agree with the actual stereotypes of the stock characters. But it's so shocking and interesting that her book so closely resembled it, that it was so easy for these people to go in without her authorization and change a few names, and they had the most famous play. But no, she was openly against it.
I think one of the really interesting things, you mentioned that it was, with Mammy, it was like a cultural sign of relief, which I think is a lot of, and at least in my reading of Uncle Tom's Cabin, is a lot of what Stowe was trying to do, is try to set the audience at ease about Africans, and sort of say, no, look, if we free them, it's going to be fine, they're not going to kill us all. Which sort of seems, well, because the other racialized view is, that they're savages, and if we treat them like people, then they're going to kill us. And so I just thought that there was a really interesting connection with the sort of we're really comfortable with this sort of a black character. I just thought that was a really interesting connection.
It's interesting because, like I said, the cultural sigh of relief, when you see this Mammy character, she's around her owner's children. She's completely trusted to be in the house, around the personal goods. She even sometimes gets to teach the kids if she's literate. The amount of trust placed in this stock character, it's meant to give the audience this, okay, that's like one less thing we have to worry about right now. But in Uncle Tom's Cabin, the way that she moved these characters around to give the cultural sigh of relief, it really kind of had the opposite effect right away, where it was like, whoa, wait, we can trust these people? So I do think that's interesting.
So I have a question, but maybe a comment along the way, which is that I mean, it seems to me that there's a real connection between what Shannon and Lauren are talking about and some of the stuff that Jessica uncovered about, representations of Native Americans. Because on the one hand, there's a sort of view of Native Americans in the 19th century that sees them as stubborn and defiant and proud, which is a sort of source of their extinction. But I mean, Jessica sort of interestingly uncovered a sympathetic, sentimental tradition of portrayals of Native Americans. I think is very much in line with the kinds of things that you're depicting or describing in terms of the cultural work of a Mammy figure. And you can feel free to comment on that. Go ahead.
I just think it correlates a lot with what Lauren said about like having both a fear and a fascination of the African Americans in the same way that a lot of people have of the Native Americans as well. So
I definitely agree too. I think the symbol, like the noble savage symbol of the Native American, and then the Magua symbol of the Native American are two like completely different views, and one sort of leads you to think a certain way about it, and almost like they're so close to nature, and that's like a magnificent, it's almost like a special thing, like that last painting we saw, and then there's a million other paintings with, fierce, bloody pictures, and it's like this sort of, I don't know, you have two different ways to think about the same type of thing, and it does definitely compare, I think, exactly the same with that, with your paper.
That wasn't actually my question, but that's great. My question is actually, I guess it's a question for Jerry and Susan. So, one of the things, that's one of the odd defining features of Natty Bumppo in the leather stocking paintings. He's an odd figure to think of in terms of, I don't know, like masculine ideals for and stuff. Because I mean, aside from his insistence on his racial purity, which, as both of you remarked upon, is his celibacy. I mean, he's adamantly celibate. There is no future for Natty Bumppo. There are going to be no little Bumpos.
No, it's true.
He's not a reproducer.
Yeah.
So I just wonder if you can, neither of you really talk about that, but can you talk a little bit about that feature? Like, how would you incorporate that in terms of your thinking about him and MS?
For me, it's the strangest thing, because that is a huge point of it, and obviously when you're talking about masculinity, that point is going to come into play also, obviously. And it's weird because he sort of throws, instead of like a traditional relationship, he sort of trades that in for more of like a male camaraderie relationship with his Indian companion. And I find that interesting. I have trouble explaining that myself. I honestly do. And if I had more time to, look into it, but I honestly, I can't think of a good answer for that one. It's hard.
Susan, maybe you have the answer.
No, I'm just thinking I should have done my paper on that. No, that's really great. No, unfortunately I kind of focused more on David and his heightened sexuality too, of course, but he's, celibate as well.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is, I guess I really didn't draw the parallels between that.
Sort of, and how, we discussed in class when we were talking about Last Mohicans too, and how Hayward and Alice sort of serve as this image for the future of America at the end, because they are the two that will be fitting together, and obviously they can reproduce, and that's going to be what will carry it. But I feel as if there's a place in American history for a constant Natty Bumppo. That character doesn't have to be like a continuous, he doesn't have to be there, the symbol of the future, but there's a reason for him to be there. And Hayward and Alice can't get to that future without the assistance of him and his Indian companions.
Well, this is the Western hero too. If you like Western films, it's Shane riding off into the sunset. It's John Wayne at the end of The Searchers. These violent male characters can't be. I think real. Maybe the violence is the way to think through it. Actually, to link nicely with these sympathetic portraits, where you need to bring gender into it in a way that violence can't be reassimilated into society.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine him like hanging up his stuff at the end of the day and going home to a wife after all of what he's been through and stuff like that. It is interesting.
Any other questions?
my name is Susan. First of all, I really liked your topic. It was great.
Thank you.
I don't know if you actually looked into this. I was actually just curious myself. Did your topic at all spark any really major feministic debate, perhaps?
mean, I guess the only extent would be the Grevin article, which I think it kind of touches on how when men were kind of, discussed in effeminate ways, how that was negatively, looked at in society. But as far as Cora's character, I think, she would kind of bear most of that feminine argument. Not really, basically, Cooper is perhaps portraying what society is, ready for at this stage in Antebellum America, that there is no room for women that define their gender roles. So that'd be something interesting to look into.
Rob, did I see your hand
Yeah.
come up? And we can maybe close out with this one to stay on time.
So Jessica, I have a question for you. I thought, really, this was a terrific panel. You saw us whispering, it was just how good each of your papers were. So your paper focused on this largely sympathetic portrait of Native Americans. And it seems to me that sympathetic picture often depended upon its kind of natural, the association of Native Americans with nature. I wonder if there's a way that you could see that sympathetic natural image as just the flip side of the dangerous savagery.